Hello, I'm David Hunt, CEO and founder of Hyperion Executive Search and your host for the Leading Cleantech podcast. Welcome back to the new season after a summer. Hopefully you had a good summer. We're already sort of rapidly growing into autumn. Guest today is a great podcaster also, but is the CEO and co-founder of an energy storage business called Modo Energy. Quentin Scrimshire, great to have you with us.
Hey, thanks for having me on. Big fan of what you guys are doing, and it's nice to be in the hot seat.
It is odd when you're on the opposite side of the equation, isn't it? So we'll talk about your podcast shortly, but mostly we'll talk about, obviously, the world of energy storage and Modo Energy. But before we take a deep dive, perhaps you can just give us the quick elevator pitch of what and who Modo are.
Yeah, it would be a real pleasure. So Modo Energy is a company that's been going for 5.5 years. And in short, we are obsessed with how grid-scale energy storage makes money. Okay, so the big picture thing here is that the world is going to build $100 trillion of new energy assets, and that's wind and solar, and a big chunk of that is going to be energy storage. And that's going to sit on the global balance sheet, on private companies' balance sheets. And in order to sit on those balance sheets, you need to figure out how much money they've made in the past. You need to benchmark how well these assets are doing. And you also need to value them, at least on a quarterly basis, sometimes on a monthly basis. And in order to value anything in this world, you need to figure out how much money it's going to make in the future and do a discounted cash flow. And so we help with both sides of that. If you own or operate or invest in energy storage assets, we help you figure out what's going on in the market, how well those assets are doing, and how well they might do in the future, so you can make the right decisions around your business.
Great. Okay. I mean, that's always and still is, and will probably forever be the issue, or not the issue, but the opportunity that comes with energy storage is the various different ways to stack revenues in different sort of territories and countries, and we will obviously come on to that, because at the moment you're heavily focused on the UK and the ERCOT market. You're actually calling, obviously, in from Austin in Texas. Is that right?
I am. So I live in Austin, Texas. That's right. Although we're about to launch in California, we just opened our New York office. And our first hires have been made in Berlin office. So yeah, we really are going now for global scale. Our products are live in Great Britain and ERCOT, but we'll have coast-to-coast coverage in the US and a few European countries by next year. And our first landing party is on the way to Australia as well.
Right.
It's all happening.
It sounds it. Dig into that. But obviously, I always like to start with a little bit of the backstory, because this, we were talking recently. Obviously, I had the pleasure to meet you in the London office, and we were talking about the number of people in the talent pool, obviously in terms of with experience and looking for people with 10 years of energy storage or flexibility experience. And you're one of the rare people that has exactly that. So perhaps you can share a little bit of your journey before co-founding Modo.
Well, look, I mean, on that, so yeah, I've been doing battery stuff for about 10 years, but I mean, the whole world of energy storage is changing so fast that it feels like you need to relearn it every 2 years anyway. I'm a big fan of hiring on skills and potential rather than experience generally, and we do that as a company. But yeah, my background is I was an engineer. I was a power systems engineer, so everything high voltage and big spinning stuff. Went to work for Centrica PLC when they used to have this 4-year graduate program for engineers, and they'd fly you around the world and put you in all sorts of cool things. So I worked in offshore wind for a year. I worked in offshore gas, I was in oil and gas, and then big gas-fired power stations. And then I got into battery energy storage, and I got hooked on it. I absolutely loved it. And at the time, we were building a Centrica, what was the biggest battery energy storage site in Europe. It was a 50 megawatt site. Still exists. It's called Roosecote. It is a beautiful thing. Rather than being in 40-foot shipping containers, it's in a building. It's built incredibly well. And I worked on that project, and then I left to join a company called Kiwi Power, which was one of the first big aggregators. And it was a venture capital backed business. I really loved the growth, being in a growth company. And all the things that come with that, the pressures, and it feels like a pressure cooker, and you've got people coming and going, and new markets, new territories. I loved that, and so when the company sold to ENGIE, it was about time that I moved on. I'm more of a small company guy than a big company guy, and started Modo Energy with Tim, my co-founder. And Tim and I have known each other for 20 years. We actually went to the same school together in Birmingham, and we know each other inside out. So that's a good bloke to start a company with. The one you sat next to in year 7.
Yeah. There's an interesting story around that, and we're often challenged by, and as a conversation I have to have with VCs around the benefits of a solo founder versus a co-founder. I touched on it with some recent guests, and it'd be great perhaps again to elaborate on that. It's not often that it's a school friend that you do these things with, but like you say, you certainly know each other's good and bad sides from that period of time.
So yeah, I mean, I couldn't imagine doing it on my own. I mean, there's the founding story. It's always more than just one or two of you, right? You've got early
Yeah.
employees. We've got some early employees who've been around since pretty much day one. There's a whole founding team and mindset. But being two people on the board and sharing ideas and sharing the stress of it, I couldn't imagine doing it any other way. So Tim and I are equal partners in this business, and we both do very different things. He's very product focused. I'm very commercial and revenue focused. Actually, we're both product geeks. We both love product, but it works really, really well.
Who doesn't love batteries, right?
Well, yeah, it does help you if you work in an industry that's changing as fast as ours. I love software businesses, and I love the energy sector, and I love anything with a technology S curve, like wind and solar or mobile phones or whatever. And there's no other technology S curve going on right now than battery cells. I think it's the most underestimated thing that's happening to our whole economy is what batteries are going to do.
Yeah, absolutely, and we're blessed to have many clients at the cutting edge of that, which is good fun just to see what the future ideally is going to look like if some of these obviously technologies break through. But going back to your point before, I remember avidly looking forward to the first 50 megawatt storage sites coming online, as we were obviously previously primarily in and around solar and renewables. But it feels like a long time ago, and yet in the great scheme of things, it wasn't actually that long ago that we were still talking about 50s.
Yeah, I mean, it's remarkable. I mean, if you see just from some of the conferences like Intersolar recently, you can see that in a 40-foot shipping container. So these are the long, thin ones that you often see in pictures of battery energy storage. So only 5 or 6 years ago, you could fit 1 to 1.5 megawatt hours of energy capacity in one of those things. And you might have to have some other containers around it for other parts of kit, in inverters and stuff. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but now you can now go and buy a 40-foot shipping container with 5 megawatt hours in it, and there is work being done to fit 7 or 8 in. And what that does is it totally changes all of the economics around projects, because you can fit more on a smaller footprint, but then you have to have less foundations, and you have to do the cost. The cost impact is non-linear, because every inch of space you save has impacts everywhere else. I just think about that, comparing to a 50 megawatt asset 10 years ago, or even 7 or 8 years ago, which was massive. And the whole thing is going to change again.
Yeah. That should go back to your point about sort of how dynamic a market is, which is great, but it's a challenge on every front from a technological point of view, from our side in terms of from a talent perspective. But all of these things are changing so rapidly. Perhaps share a little bit again, because again, you chose after the Kiwi Power experience, which again was sort of broadly around flexibility to found a company there. Founding a company is always a challenge and obviously a leap of faith. But why in particular did you choose the sort of the benchmarking and platform that Modo it sort of lives in now?
Well, forgive me for sounding really corny, but we didn't really choose it. It chose us. So I knew I wanted to start a business pretty much straight after university. I've always known that. And Tim, my co-founder, we've always wanted to start a business together. Our first ideas in our 20s were all about importing pumps for power stations or other Chinese goods or some sort of arbitrage on Chinese imports. And we never sort of worked it out. But the company that we started, Modo Energy, was a very different idea, which was that we think that the world's going to build loads of battery energy storage, and that the optimization of it is going to be a key part of the value chain. And so we were going to build an optimizer, but a low-cost optimizer. It would be the Ryanair of battery optimization. So really small team, and really, really lean and cost-focused, everything about cost. And what we found was about a year into building that company, nobody was going to buy it. So a couple of things. Our balance sheet was too small to really have market access and do what we wanted to do. And secondly, the competition in that optimizer space became really fierce. And we, doing the maths on the size of the market, we felt we were going to burn too much cash trying to get to scale and trying to compete with lots of other great competitors. There's some fantastic optimizers out there. And we figured this isn't the market for us. But what else can we do? And in building some optimization software, which was very rudimentary, but it did the job, we had to benchmark it against a load of other partners. So we used to benchmark it against, all of the names you can imagine. And it didn't come top, but it was all right. It was like top quartile. And we showed this to some customers, and we made this leaderboard thing and ranked everybody. And they said, well, we don't want your optimization software, but we're really interested in that leaderboard thing. What's that? And so we started selling a report, honestly, a Word document, a PDF report via email that people used to pay us once a month for, and used to get this email sent to them with a report on, here's all the batteries, here's all the operators, here's what we think, here's our opinion on their performance. And anyway, this thing started being forwarded left, right, and center, and we had investors interested and all sorts. And we were so frustrated. We couldn't believe, people were paying us for this product, and then they were forwarding it, and everyone was getting it for free. And what we didn't realize at the time was it was kind of really, really basic in our little bubble, some element of viral marketing there, because we had more and more interest, and then we built it into a platform, and then it became real time, and then we added APIs, and then we started to look and feel more like a Bloomberg of the energy sector. And it just grew and grew and grew. And then our leaderboard turned into a benchmark, which turned into an index, which is a fundamental piece of data infrastructure for the industry now in the UK and the US. We're very proud of that, and it's a great privilege to do that. And then our forecasting side of the business, which is the fastest growing part of our business, actually, has been 2.5 years' work, and is going from strength to strength too. But we started the company to take an active role in power markets, a bit like a trader, and we found our feet doing the opposite, which is being completely outside the market and providing data on who's in the lion's den.
That viral thing, as you say, is great when you start to see from a product market fit point of view. There's definitely that if there are people demanding and obviously forwarding on and sharing that kind of stuff. But pivots are always challenging. It's always there's normally one or two within most founder stories or startup stories to a degree or so. How did you sort of, I guess, structure the growth plan and the business model? You talked before about having investors knocking on the door. I don't know at what point you may have taken on any money, or have you bootstrapped entirely, but how did that sort of work from, okay, this is the direction of travel. How do we build that business rather than the one we started with?
So just to be clear, when I said investors, what I meant, was investors in batteries.
Okay.
Actually, the first couple of years was really challenging for us to raise money. We had, we must have pitched the business 100 times. Most people said no for all good, good, sensible reasons. In fact, the fundraising process is an incredibly humbling thing. And I think it's good for an entrepreneur to do it, because you have to have loads of self-belief to do the thing. But then the fundraising process is one where you really have to be you end up being very vulnerable, and you have some of the smartest people in the world questioning you and the business and putting it through the ringer. And that's a very good thing. It's a very healthy thing to do that. And I have to do that every 12 to 18 months. I think that's a good thing. Doing the pivot, Tim and I have, I'd say we still do this, but less so as we've got to scale. We've always run the business on gut feeling. And that is, we are in the detail, and we are speaking to customers more than anyone else. And we are using gut feeling to guide the business. And now we're building a management team who we're instilling that kind of gut feeling and those instincts as well. And so in order to do a pivot, the idea of doing a pivot is always a lot more dramatic, I think, in narratives than it is in real life. Because by the time you make the decision, you get everyone in the team around the whiteboard and go, guys, this is not working. We've got to change something. You've already been through this, and hopefully you've got smart people in the business. These early employees have already done it in their head. They're waiting for a new direction anyway. And you've had little test conversations with customers. So by the time you do the pivot, it's already sort of happened. It's already priced in to everybody. And it's actually a sense of relief. Even though it feels like you're going risk on with an unknown, there is definitely a sense of relief with, okay, we have a direction, we have a plan, we have tactics, let's go again now. That's my experience of it. I imagine on a bigger company, as the company gets bigger, it's more and more challenging to do with communication properly a strategic pivot. But all the ones we've done, and we've done a few little pivots, have always been very rapid and gut-led.
Well, clarity, absolutely. I think we touched on this before. Clarity is so important when you're going through these things, because people are on the journey with you, and they'll believe in you. They'll go with the journey. Hopefully, most of them will come on the journey with you if there's clarity of mission, and there's open and honesty around that. And I think so many founders don't engage or don't know how to bring the team with them, and sometimes that can cause issues. So it's great that actually you find that ability to communicate and provide clarity that's enabled you to get to the point where you are now, which is, how many heads are you now roughly?
Between 50 and 60. Just a comment on that though. I think it comes down to and so look, I'm in my mid-30s. I've never been a CEO before. So I'm working this out as I go along. And lots of the people in our business have never done the kind of seniority that they have within our business before, because we hire a lot of young people and people with less experience, lots of wild cards. We can talk about that later. On purpose. The point that I'm saying here is doing these kind of change management in the business, I think, is much easier if you are really intentional and you have protocols around ensuring that people have context in the business. There's a lot of business buzzword of what I just said there. Let me tell you what I actually mean. I mean being radically transparent, so telling everyone all the information that they need to do, that they need to know, and some that they don't need to know, in order for them to have the context to make decisions for the business. And we do that so everyone can access the business plan, and I present the business plan to the team regularly. We're doing whatever it is, whether it's hiring, fundraising, all of the kind of taboo subjects in the business. We're transparent about that within the company. And it makes it builds so much trust. I'm not saying we always get it right by any means, but it means that when you do need to change direction, people are already with you.
Yeah, no, I think it's so fundamentally important. And as I always think, and obviously I see it from the other side of the coin, what makes people stick with companies? Why do they stay? Why do they go through these trials and tribulations? And obviously there are a number of reasons, but clarity and openness and transparency are one of the key things that talented people will stay with you, because they think they can, obviously, if they buy into and understand what is your mission, they see a path for them to be able to contribute to it. But if there's any kind of vagueness around the mission, or any kind of, I'm not being told the full picture here, they're the people, and as headhunters, we knock on their door. They're like, "Oh, interesting. Tell me something about that." But if they're really bought into the mission, understand exactly what the challenges are, warts and all, they're the ones who say, "Well, actually, do you know what? I'm just going to stick this out because this is going to be a fun journey."
Well, my proudest point about Modo, I have lots of them because we've got such an excellent team who do amazing things every day. But people don't leave this company; they just don't leave. So we've had one person leave in however many hires. Okay, so people sometimes leave because they don't pass their probation. Fine. I think all businesses should do that. And we're very proud to have a very high talent bar and expectations of team members. But people do not leave Modo because they get a better offer or they want to go and do something else. And that is we must be doing something right. There must be something about this team and this community and this purpose which means people want to stick at it, even though it's really hard. And we create an environment which is incredibly challenging. Don't get me wrong, must be the hardest place to work for most of our staff ever. And they've all done incredible things. But they don't want to leave. So we must be doing something right.
Yeah. No, it's a good testament for business. And again, being on the other side of the coin, it's the business is where people are always open to a conversation, that you know that there are issues within that business. Those who say thanks but go away, you know that there's a sound business underneath. Let's look a little bit at the something you touched on there, and we spoke about before, was the journey from yourself personally, or for a person in this transition as a CEO. So there's no sort of rule book from a startup CEO point of view, because everything changes all the time. How have you adapted to being the CEO with 3 people, to the CEO with 10 people, to the CEO with 60 people? That's a really interesting journey. So any sort of insights or experiences there that you can share with those listening who perhaps are either going through or have been through, or perhaps are yet to go through some of those challenges?
This is a whole podcast in itself, but where to start? When it's just a few of you in a room and you call yourself the CEO, you're not really the CEO. You're just the person who every now and again has to make a decision when no one else wants to. But I think at this position where we are at the moment, with a fully functioning board and 20 million of capital raised and a growth plan to be in 4 continents next year, it starts to feel like I am actually a CEO. And along the way, there's been a general journey. I'd say the big things are, every 6 months or so, it feels like the job's completely changed. The job description has changed. And the way that I fulfill that job has to completely change. So I have to constantly reinvent myself. And I do that with a really great team of help. So I have a coach, for example, an executive coach who's terrific. I have a really supportive board who have been incredibly, they've been behind me all the way. And that's a great foundation. And then other mentors around who I go and ask lots of questions about. I think the key thing to, I'm saying this now at 50 people. When I get to 100, I will say something completely different. But at this particular stage, with all this change and lots of high stakes decisions being made a lot around international expansion and people getting promoted and lots of other things, customer conversations, all that stuff. I think the trust element is more important than anything else. And I think what I'm very fortunate, is that because we're transparent, there's been a lot of times where over the last 5-6 years of running this business, people have seen Tim and I, but also the management team, do the right thing even when nobody's looking. And this is not an optics thing. This is what's an ethical way to run a business for the best interest of the whole team, not just the founders or the management team or the board, right? Because everyone in our business has got equity in the business. Everybody's a share option holder, and they take it very, very seriously, and as they should. And so I think now that we have enough touch points where even when things get really tricky, we've taken the hard route, which might be more expensive and more painful because it's the right thing to do. I do believe that the trust is there. And once the trust is there, people will support you even though you're going to make mistakes. And I make loads of mistakes all the time. And I'm giving a lot of leeway because the trust is there. But the job changes all the time. Definitely not perfect at it. I've got some incredible people who guide me, and wouldn't be here without them.
Cool. Thanks for sharing that. So there's a couple of things there. I think one of which, just picking up briefly, because it's a conversation that comes up with some of the great founders I've had on the podcast so far, is around that long-term view. And that's the decisions that are made for the long term and the longevity of the business and those in it, versus those which are the shortcuts or the shorter term or the more self-interested things. And that can be really tough when, you're flying the plane by the seat of your pants sometimes, and it can be easy to be tempted to perhaps take an easier option or a shorter term. But when you have the concentration on the long-term view, it sounds like you agree with, perhaps you just sort of touch on that as well, that the decision-making with that long-term view is actually what gets you to the long-term ultimately.
Where to start with this? I actually would say the opposite. So there's a big vision, right? We know that the market is a rapidly growing market, lots of investment, lots of capital moving into the sector. It's a very complex problem to solve. And I can talk about the vision till the cows come home. But really, I think the secret sauce and magic of a company that moves with the kind of speed that we move with, which is doubling on pretty much all metrics, or sometimes more than doubling, every year, right? So we're 100% year-on-year growth company, and that covers pretty much all of our metrics. And that's a very inorganic way to grow a business. You have to do that with force. You can't just do it, by letting things happen. And I think the way to achieve that is, I believe execution is way more challenging than strategy. And actually executing with urgency on everything you do, and an extremely high intolerance for mediocre is a much bigger advantage to a business that's moving quickly than the strategy. I know that if you go to business school, you learn about Southwest Airlines and hub and spoke and all these these Coke versus Pepsi and all these case studies. I don't believe it. I think the magic, having worked in a few companies before this, the magic is in execution, and that comes with leading with urgency and really disdain for average.
Yeah. Well, perhaps we sort of missed it. When I talk about long view, it's the long term, looking after your customers and your staff and your knowledge that, yes, it's going to be rocky. Execution fast for sure. I don't mean slow down. Things in all of these industries that we're involved with are exceptionally quick, but it's not taking the shortcuts. I think you would put it as doing the right thing even when no one's watching. That's the kind of thing I was referring to. The other thing, go back to the challenge of your role or the role of a CEO growing or changing fundamentally very, very, very significantly over the course of, as you say, from the 3 to the 50 to the 100 people, is reinventing yourself and going back to that sort of communication. How have you personally dealt with that? You say obviously you've got to reinvent yourself every 18 months or so, and you've got some good people around you and boards. That always helps, of course. But what are some of the challenges or the perhaps more the tougher times you personally have had to go through in this journey so far?
I guess the thing I should come clean on is I have a bit of a cheat code, which is that my mum is a speech and language therapist and a communications expert. So I've always grown up in a household where communication has been drilled into me, all elements of communication. And then when I was growing up, I was really into drama. So I've always enjoyed performing. So those two things together means I'm actually quite comfortable up on stage. I really enjoy working with anywhere where there's an audience. I'm probably a bit of an attention seeker. But it does mean that I'm comfortable in articulating generally ideas. But the things I really struggle with are when it comes to communicating very tricky stuff to the team that may not make everyone happy, but I believe is the right call. But it certainly isn't the call to be likable, right? It's the tough decision that actually will make people maybe even they'll like the decision much less because it'll affect them, but it's for the best interest of the company. Those situations I find really difficult, and in that situation, sometimes my throat gets a bit funny, and look, my job communicating it is not as hard as the people that have a negative impact from these kind of things. It's very rare that it happens, but I certainly don't get it right all the time. And then the thing that I really enjoy is speaking to customers and articulating what the customer wants and trying to figure out what that is. That's a fun thing to think about and to try and communicate. And as long as we talk to customers more than anyone else, we'll do all right.
Yeah. Now, thanks for sharing. So let's jump back to the business on that front. So who typically are, at the present time at least, the main sort of customer or customer types for Modo?
There are 3 ideal customer profiles for our company. The first one, and the most important one, is asset owners. So companies that own physical assets or development assets. The second one is what we call operators and utilities. So these are companies that will be trading power through these assets. They might have optimization contracts. They might have other tertiary contracts related to it. The third ICP for us, the third customer profile, is banks and institutions. And this is a big growing part of our business who are using our forecast product to lend against assets and to get money moving within the sector. So there's those 3. But there is an additional layer to it. And we have this phrase at Modo, which is built for analysts. What that means is we build for the people in the bottom of the organization, because analyst tends to be a junior role. And why do we do that? Well, we think there's a big demographic change that's happening in the energy sector, where you're having lots of young people who want to work with passion and with purpose in an important sector that's changing the world.
Yeah. And
those millennials and Gen Zs, they want to interact with businesses very, very differently to folks that are older than them. So they want to self-serve. They want to consume media. They want to see behind the curtain of companies. Professionalism feels like a different thing to them. They want you to be honest with them, and they're very curious about the operational workings of a business rather than just the front shop window, if you like. And so that's why we've gone hard at media. We've gone hard at video. We've invested a lot in our APIs, so these people tend to be able to write a few lines of code because they're not, the next OpenAI engineer. And so those kind of things all add up. So we build for the bottom of the organization, and then we build for asset owners, operators, utilities, and banks.
The last point you made is probably the reasoning perhaps behind the block party, of which I missed the last one of. But to talk to us a little bit about more than just that, just your approach and love for the energy storage market, which obviously has involved with some of these networking events that you institute, and of course with the Transmission podcast, which we can talk a little bit about. So how have you, I guess, was that purely commercial decision? You mentioned perhaps like most of us podcasters like the sound of our own voice a little bit, but is there some sort of strategic plan behind that type of activity and that route to market?
Yeah, there's a few elements to this. So, and I won't go through all of them, but we have a number of principles in our business, which is how we run the business, inspired by Ray Dalio, when you come across him. And one of the principles is the customer is the hero, not us. Right. So we're here to empower our customers to do amazing things. They are building assets, they're operating assets, they're financing assets. They are doing the stuff that gets the net zero mission done. We are a supporting actor, right? We just help them do that. It's not about us, it's about them. And when you apply that principle in lots of different ways around the business, you can come to some really interesting outcomes. So, for example, anything that we can do to help them do, their heroic journey better, like educational materials, we will do. Or anything that we can do that will bring those people together and celebrate them, we'll do. So that's why we spend a lot of time and money on community events. In fact, our marketing budget is split between, unusually, rather than spending money on normal marketing things, we spend 80% of our marketing budget on media and 20% of our marketing budget on community. And that ranges from educational video series, which you would have seen, loads of stuff going on socials and YouTube. YouTube's actually massive for us now. And you should check that out if you're listening. And then, of course, community is just throwing big parties, anything that gets people in a casual way together to celebrate them, but also to get them meeting each other, and hopefully that will reduce boundaries and get the whole get money flowing. That's the idea. And then the other thing is that it's not charity, right? This makes good business sense. Because if you remember, we build for analysts, these are younger people in the bottom of organizations, and they usually want 15 to 20 touch points with a brand before they make a buying decision. It's very different. They don't want to, there's not a steak dinner and then they say yes or no. And so we market to them a bit like B2C rather than B2B. And then on the community element and the things like our ENGIE Academy, which is one of the biggest libraries of free information about battery energy storage you're going to find anywhere in the world. And we do that for free. Yes, because we believe in it as a mission to reducing barriers to entry for new folks entering the industry, of course. But it's also good business sense, because if people's first touch point on energy storage is Modo Energy's ENGIE Academy, and they binge watch 60 minutes of content, then they're going to have a good feeling about us. And that's why we justify it on an ROI basis. It's also important very much for me and the team to do it on a mission basis, but this is how we justify spending the money on it.
Yeah. The podcast, again, because going back to your point there, that's one of the reasons I set up this podcast, is because there were so many stories I was hearing from founders and from entrepreneurs and investors that I felt would be really useful to the broader community to learn something from, or to adapt from, or see someone else's mistakes, or realize it's not just you doing all these things. And so adding value into the community, and near best part of 5 years later, we're still running that. So, and for me, it's fun as well, because I get to talk to people like you that are doing crazy things as well. So, but going back to that point, the sort of, I get the younger people and the touch points and the social media and all that kind of stuff is great for those people, perhaps the analysts in the entry level within the sector. But the podcast is really informative as well. Is that aimed at a slightly different audience, or what's the sort of the evolution of the podcast and the type of guests that people can join and come and listen to on the Transmission podcast? Yeah,
so I should probably disclaimer, there's no concerted effort to single out youth in our content. It's just that entry-level people who are new to the industry tend to be at a graduate kind of level. Okay, so why did we start doing a podcast? We started doing a podcast because we figured we were having loads of really interesting conversations with customers and partners and clients, and it would just be totally cool to open that up to other people to listen. And then the podcast medium itself, it feels totally normal now, but over the last few years has grown and grown and grown, and we've really benefited from that. I think it's been, on a personal level, if we speak, podcast host to podcast host, who wouldn't love all of the stuff you get to learn and the interesting people you get to hang around with and go and listen and experience as part of hosting a podcast? On a personal level, I really enjoy doing it. It's very enriching, and it feels like, it's a lot of fun. I look forward to doing it. And then we constantly get feedback from people and listeners who say, really love actually, we get lots of critical feedback as well. And that's actually more important, because then we can learn and improve. But we come across people who say, just got into the sector, listened to 10 episodes, absolutely love it. And then I decided to go and get a job at Gore Street Capital, right? And it really helped me prepare for that interview. And that's terrific. Right? That's what we're trying to do here. And then over time, we've been surprised how fast it's grown, and the reach that it's had. It's now pan-European. We have listeners all around the world, in the US and Asia as well. And it's one of those things that the compounding effect is really remarkable. So a lot of fun. We wanted to do it as a way to give back a little bit. And then as we've done it, we've just enjoyed it more and more. So why not carry on?
Yeah. No, it's good fun. And as you say, it's surprising how that compounding does work and how many people do actually, as you say, listen to the pods of yours, Redefining Energy, ours, and various others that really help them and support them in their in their growth. Let's jump a little bit back to the business. In terms of the services and offerings and benchmarking makes sense from the customers you've described. Is there any element of or plan to perhaps bring that earlier to be able to help people with yield predictions before developing a site? So the choice of technologies, the choice of locations, the choice of interactions and co-location, this kind of stuff. Is there any element of that to sort of support and predict pre-build, or was it primarily existing assets and the optimization and the forecasting from that?
No, totally. We a lot of our customers now are pre-build stage, and since we're famous for being a benchmarking company. Obviously, we started as something different and we pivoted a couple of times, but we're famous for being a benchmarking company. The problem if you're a benchmarking company is to be interesting, to benchmark a market, there has to be a lot, critical mass of interesting batteries there. So, for example, There's lots of European countries which are really exciting from an investor standpoint right now, but they wouldn't be very interesting to benchmark because there's only a couple of assets live, right?
Right.
But now, the last 2.5 years, we've been building our forecast capability, which is now approved by some of the biggest banks in the world and widely used across Europe. These forecasts are applicable at the site level. So you can specify, we've built a model, put it in the cloud, and we put the keys in your hands. Yes, there's a Modo central scenario, which is what we believe. And if you want to raise bank finance, you probably need to use that one. But you can also set your own scenarios and your own characteristics of the model run, and then run it in the cloud, and it spits out a load of data that's useful to you, such as, should you build here, what the ROI would look like, that kind of thing. And so, I'd say about half of our customers now on our forecast products are pre-build. They are deciding where should they build assets, what size, what technology type, all of that stuff.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, very much needed. With one of our clients, PV case to perform a very similar thing in the PV world, and it's just changed the solar world dramatically, and they've obviously gone on to do great things, and looks like you're following suit in many ways. It's been great to spend some time with you, Quentin, and obviously, as ever is the case, you could have 20 podcasts with the top subjects we've touched on so far, but unfortunately time is against us. Could you share perhaps a little bit of where people can go to find some of these assets you've talked about in terms of the academy and the podcast, etc., and so that people can engage further if they should wish to?
So if you head to modoenergy.com, there'll be a deluge of information that you'll find interesting about the battery energy storage market. You can check us out there. We also put a lot of stuff on LinkedIn for free, so you should check that out. And then YouTube. YouTube's a massive driver, a big audience for us right now. And so you should definitely subscribe on YouTube, because there's some stuff that only goes up on YouTube, some stuff that only goes up on LinkedIn. And then, of course, our website is where everything goes.
Okay, we'll make sure we point people to those links on the episode page for the podcast. But it's been great to spend some time with you. Thanks very much for sharing, and hopefully we'll speak again very soon.
Thank you, David. It's a pleasure.